Welcome everyone, I'm Laura Berlage here at my family farm east of Hayward, Wisconsin, North Star Homestead Farms. And one of the things I did preparing for today's class is I shot a video tutorial outside in our woods to help you learn how to sustainably harvest balsam boughs and other wild plant materials that you might like to use in your wreath. So Jessa is going to put the link to that video in the chat section. So copy that down and you can watch that at your leisure so that you get that part of the class. Right now I have all my boughs here in a box and all of my supplies laid out. So let me share my secondary camera with you so that you can see my work surface. And it might take just a couple seconds to load. Let's start by talking about different types of wreath bases. This one here is a commercial style wreath base. When it comes new, these little clamps are open like little tiny jaws, and you lay all of the boughs all at once inside, and then it goes into a machine that clamps them together. That works for places that have machines to do that clamping, and is very common in the big wreath barns where they make lots and lots of holiday wreaths. So at this point, this wreath base is not very helpful to us. So we'll set that one aside. This wreath base is very handy if you can find them. Oh, camera, refocus. There we go. And because the crinkling works very nice to hold the boughs in place. It isn't always possible to find a base like this, but if you find them, use them over and over. However, what we're going to do today instead is we're going to use wreath bases with materials that you have at home. Okay, camera, refocus. You can do it. All the way. Refocus. So we're going to make a wreath base out of coat hangers. And you want to have 2 coat hangers because if you just have one, as you add the boughs, they're going to want to flip back and forth and just be very naughty. So having 2 will give us a lot more stability. So grab your needle nose pliers for that part. And the first thing I'm going to do is line the 2 tops up, and then with my hands I'm going to start rounding out sides and the bottoms. So you don't want those extra heavy duty hangers that are like made out of really hard metal. You can use the wimpy ones in the back of the closet that you don't like to use for other things anyway. All right, that's coming along. You can do that with the pliers if it's not comfortable on your hands. And then holding this end together, I'm going to start to flip the 2 layers around each other so that they hold together better. Last little bit. There you go. And it doesn't have to be perfectly round, just mostly round. And then I'll come here to the top, grab these guys, bring them around, and kind of flip this one around that one, get them to interlock a little bit. And that then becomes where you can put it on your hook or your nail to hang it when it's all done. So that's going to be our base for our wreath. Next, you're going to want to have some florist wire. And florist wire can come in a variety of gauges. This is a 22 gauge, so it's a little sturdier than the really, really fine florist wire, which I like because we want to put some good tension on it as we go. And I also like how this florist wire is on this little spool, because it gives me something nice to grip on rather than pulling just on the raw wire, which can be hard on your hands. So first we'll come up here, hold these two guys together, curl around that, and then I'm going to twist the wire back on itself several times. And then I'm going to wrap around, and I go through the middle, up and over, through the middle, up and over. I'll do that 3 times so that when I give a tug on it, it's not going to slip and come undone. So just make sure you get that good tug. It's not going anywhere. Now we're ready to start assembling our wreath onto our base. So here is one of the boughs that I harvested from our woods. And this is about how big it is when I take it off the tree. But if I put that whole thing on the wreath, I would have a wreath like Einstein's hairdo. So we need to trim this down into manageable pieces. So get your garden shears, and you can use the same method that we're going to use on our hands at the end of class to get the pitch off your shears. And what we want to do is we want to come to the ends, get this guy out of the way, the ends of the bough, and we want to trim off pieces that are roughly hand size. And we're going to take them from the tips, so we can just go all the way around. Like this is a bit big here. So
Laura, can you back your camera out just a little bit so we can see? We're getting a lot of detail and hard to see the full perspective.
Let's try that.
I think that's better. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
So there we go. Hand-sized, roughly hand-sized pieces. We don't want little tiny pieces because we'll be at this forever. But if we have great big bushy pieces, it will get unruly. So just go around the edges and trim those off. Now you might look back at this one and say, well, couldn't I trim a hand-sized piece off of there? But that would be a second cut. And second cuts have these raw edges on them. And when that sits in your wreath, they end up sticking out like a sore thumb because they're a significantly lighter color than any of the other tips. So you can leave the second cuts behind. And now this scraggly inner part can go back to the forest and become compost. Now I went ahead and trimmed up all the other boughs so that they are ready to go. So I can just start feeding off of the box full of them that I have here. But if you're starting with just big boughs, go ahead and trim yourself a pile and then do some work, trim yourself another pile. You don't have to do it all in one setting. When you look at your boughs, there is a right side and a wrong side. The right side has this lovely dark green, really glossy color. The wrong side, which is the underside, is a lighter, less shiny, more of a toothpastey color. It's a little blueness to it. So we want to make sure that as you go, that all of the boughs are right side up. We're going to start by making a little stack with all the cut ends on the same spot. And depending on how bushy your cut pieces are, you may need to stack 2 or 5 or 6. So I have a nice hand-sized bundle. It isn't real thick. This is the right side. And I've got my fingers here where all the ends come together. And I want to make sure when I wrap around this that I'm wrapping one last thumb joint in from the end. And we're going to proceed clockwise, or the traditional term would be sunwise, around the wreath base. So I want my bough tufts to be aiming to the left and the cut ends to be aiming to the right. And I'm going to wrap around at that one thumb joint over spot twice and give it a real good tug. Then I can assemble my second clutch of boughs. That's looking good. Which I'm also going to wrap one thumb joint over, but I'm going to set where that spot is one thumb width to the right of where that wrap is. And that will mean that this section is going to get wrapped twice, once over here and once about there. So I'll lay that on. That will give your wreath more stability. And I'll wrap it twice and give it a good solid tug. So we're going to start marching our way around the wreath. Another thing that you'll find happens if you make these too bushy is you will end up with no hole in the middle of your wreath. It will be one big solid ball, which if you like that look, yeah, go for it. And that one's too long. Oh.
Laura, if you use other types of evergreen, do they all have a right side and a wrong side?
Ooh, I have some other ones with me here, and I'll talk about that with the next bundle. All right, so here we go. This bunch was a little bit longer than my last bunch, so I have more of it on this side to wrap into the wreath. My suggestion with doing wreaths with other type of greenery, and this is covered in the pre-recorded video as well, is I wouldn't recommend doing a wreath out of spruce because the needles are much more spiky than balsam. It literally will draw blood out of your hands as you work, said from experience. But I do like adding a little bit of white pine. And in that video, I talk about how you can identify white pine, and it just adds a nice textural element to work in every now and then in your piece. So for that, I'm just going to take a few sprigs, line them up, and work them in like they're another cluster. I used to also use princess pine, which is a moss. And then I learned from a friend of mine who was a naturalist that it takes 20 years to grow a princess pine this tall, and it does not come back after you pick it. So I've given the princess pines a break. Add our next cluster. And just march our way around, and I wish that I could zoom the smell right now to you, because working with the balsam is bringing out that wonderful Christmas tree smell. And after this cluster, I have another plant to show you how to add. Can everyone see it better now? All right. This is fun. This is from the tag alder, which is a tall shrub that lives on the edges of swamps and creeks. And it grows these catkins, which look like little tiny pine cones. These are the male catkins, and these are the female catkins. And they add a really lovely bit of texture. That's a bit long. Snip that off. And you can also lay that in and wrap it as another cluster, just like we did with the white pine. I also occasionally find interesting things in the woods that have little red berries on them, which sometimes fall off if they sit too long. But they do add some nice color and texture. So the secret to getting an evenly shaped wreath is to make all of your clusters the same size and to keep marching along at the same interval, that thumb width interval. So you don't skip ahead too fast in one spot and get a thin spot. If you do get a thin spot, that can be the best place to put your bow. So there's always a way to save it. And it's going to be time for some more white pine. I don't like using red pine. The branches are very thick and it's very pitchy. So it tends to make a mess. All right, some more white pine. When you're getting ready to make your wreath, it's best to harvest the boughs as close to the wreath making process as you can, and to keep them cold until you're ready to process. So I have these in a box on the porch, and that helps them stay fresh and pliable so they don't get dried out and brittle. There's a nice little cluster. And you'll notice that I've covered my work surface. I've got an old shower curtain that I'm using because I usually use black garbage bags, because then I can just take the whole surface and wrap it up and get rid of all of the stray needles. But I thought it would be easier for you to see the process with a white background. But I can still then wrap all this up and then go shake it outside. Less mess. It's always better. And let's get some more of those tag alders. Here's an interesting piece. It's got the male and the female on it together. This guy's a little crazy long, so I'm going to trim it and then bring it down so it's closer to those ones. Are we keeping up with the questions, Jessa?
Yeah, we just had a question come in. Are you saying tag alder? Can you talk a little bit more about the alders?
Yes. So where I live, TAG, alders, they come up from a crown, so they're a shrub rather than a tree. They typically grow taller than me. They're deciduous, so they lose their leaves in the winter. And they grow very copiously, so I never feel bad about giving them a trim because they are everywhere. And they, like birch trees, produce seeds via catkins rather than a cone or a fruit. And the male catkins, especially with birches, will release their pollen in, say, midwinter to late winter, and it's very lightweight and it skids across the surface of the snow and pollinates the seeds from the female catkins so that they can spread very far. So it's like a pre-pine cone development. get a little more pine.
Laura, where did you learn to make wreaths?
You know, I was trying to remember, and so you can see we're about halfway around now. And I think it was a project because I made them for a long time before I started teaching them, that my mom had found this book in the library of different kinds of nature crafts. And that's where I got started. And then I had some friends who would work in the local wreath barns in the winter, and I picked up some good tips from them as well. And my naturalist friend who told me about the princess pines, he also had some good wreath making tips that I learned, including he always liked to repurpose as much of the materials as possible. So after taking off any ornaments and things like that in the spring, after the wreath was all done, he would put what remained in his burn shelter, or you could use a fire pit, and would burn off all of the old dry dead boughs, and then he could repurpose the ring and the wire. So that's a nice tip. You don't have to get rid of any of that.
Couple of technical questions coming in. Jenny notes, it looks like the bundles are standing more vertical or kind of upright as you add more. Is that what's supposed to be happening, or is that just the camera?
As you add more, the closer you set your bundles, you will get more height. So I like my wreaths to have a little bushiness to them and not be as flat as commercial wreaths. If you set your bundles too close together, they will literally stand right up like that and be really bushy. So a little bit of that is how the wire is bending some as we go. But yes, I do want there to be some verticalness to the wreath. Thank you.
And then another question from Lorelei, who says, are you wrapping each clump or just the starting clump, and then you just add to the frame and wrap twice?
Every time I add a bundle, I wrap twice.
But you're not wrapping the bundles together before, like separately from the wreath?
Correct. I hold the bundles in my hand, and then when I add them to the frame, then I wrap them.
Lorelei,
so
I think
here
I'm interpreting that. So let us know if you didn't get the answer you need.
So there's the bundle. This is where I'm going to wrap it. I haven't wrapped it yet. I'll lay it where I'm going to wrap it, grab it, wrap twice, and tug. And I want to be sure that where I wrap the second one has some overlap so that these bundles underneath get wrapped. They end up getting caught in wrapping more than once. So that helps them not tip this way.
Feel free, if folks have other questions, to throw them into the Q&A or the chat.
All right, get some more alder. That's a fun little cluster. If you have holly where you live, that would be nice. Put little clusters of that too.
Oops. Are you cutting the wire between wrappings, or is it all just the one continuous wire coming off of the wrap?
One continuous wire coming off the spool. That's how I can keep pulling it tight. And the pulling it tight part is really critical to having a solid, not floppy wreath. And bundle. I'm coming around. Get some time. And I have a mess on the floor, but that is what brooms are for.
Oh, this is an interesting question from Amy. Wondering, is there a technique to making a two-sided wreath?
A two-sided. Well, if I flip this guy over, right now we can see where the wire and the bundles are. If you wanted to make it so it didn't sit flat, so it was fluffy all the way around, I would probably wrap one bundle here and then make another bundle, hold it on the opposite side, on this side, and then wrap again, and then move forward a notch. So it would take almost twice as much boughs to do that, but you could do that. So then if you were doing where it was on both sides, then this bundle you'd hold on this side and wrap again. That would be a very chubby wreath, but very pretty. And if you want to do a swag, you can take the coat hanger, you could do a single coat hanger and just flatten it into the middle so you have one long strip, and then you would bind from the bottom up to the middle and then from the top to the middle. And if you want the bow like 2/3, 1/3, you can do that too. You can also use the same wrapping technique on a hardy rope and make garland. I've done that too. It's the same technique. Get over there, guys.
Laura, have you made garland? Is that the same technique?
For garland, I would start with a hardy rope, and then you would do the same technique, a bundle and wrap, a bundle and wrap, a bundle and wrap. That tends to work better when you've got something a little thicker to wrap onto rather than a string. Get some more sticks. That's a lovely one. I've also seen it where people have wrapped like pheasant feathers in as they go. That's very pretty too, if you have those about. It takes more boughs than you think. So when you're harvesting, never hurts to have extra, because it's no fun to get to about here and realize that you've used up everything that you've harvested. You can always return what you don't need to the forest. All right, coming around the corner. Pine. That one is longer. Can I get that to behave itself? That will be the question. So as you're coming back around to where you started, we want to not snag these guys in our bundle. Let me get some needles out of the way so you can see that. These guys here, we want to not snag them. And it's amazing how much more we can get into this space. It's kind of like those last few rows in tapestry. Oh, you can get a little more in there. All right, tuck that one in.
Laura, there's a question about adding pine cones to the wreath.
Ooh, that will be covered in the decorating section.
Great.
I have some right here on my side table. And when we do the decorating, literally anything you can get a wire around, you can add to your wreath. Including if you look back and see that you've got a bald spot, you can take a cluster, wrap around it with a short piece of wire, stuff her in there, and wrap that around your wreath, and you can fix any gaping holes that you discover later. You can get a wire on it. You can put it on your wreath. Except maybe the cat. Don't put that on your wreath.
Can you review how many hand-sized boughs are in each bundle?
Well, that of course is dependent on how thick they are, typically between 3 and 6. So let's count one together. So this is a bigger chunk versus like this guy is a smaller chunk. So 1, 2, 3. This one's going to take 4. And what I'm looking for is in that hand size, a nice even distribution of boughs. So if I only put the 1, there's big holes here and there. And when it gets wrapped, it's only going to be that much material. Whereas if I put these on, when I pinch it, it's still about a hand size worth of wrap of coverage. So that's what I'm looking for, is like a hand, a hand, a hand. I love measurements that you can do with your hands because you don't even have to go grab a ruler. I have to make sure I keep pushing these guys over so they don't get into the action. So here's another one. I like to start with bigger ones and then fill in any of the gaps with smaller ones. So that's a 4Z there again. Really keeping it tight is important. All right, put a little more alder. And there. Give it that around. Oh, it smells good. It's beginning to smell a lot like the holidays. And push this back, because see, when you push it back, we still have all this wire to go. It really is going to take this big box full of boughs. Seems like for this size, I'm doing a lot of bundles that are 4 sprigs. It's amazing how long they last when you make them fresh like this. And they even stay kind of pretty when they get golden too.
Question, Laura, about that zigzag wreath frame that you showed us in the beginning.
Yes.
Why does that one work well?
Well, it works well because of the zigzag. It adds more stability as you wrap your bundles. It helps keep them from flopping. We're mimicking that by adding the 2 coat hangers together. So we get some width and some zig and zag. But this one is just much more efficient with it. And I can't even really tell you where these come from. They were on the farm when my sister and our mom took it over from our grandparents. So I found them in a shed. They could be 100 years old, but just a very efficient model for that. Or maybe if you have a hardy wire and some good tools, you could bend your own zigzag. Set that over there. As makes a very stable surface. But it also, because it's wire, it's still narrow. So we're not eating up a ton of florist wire with a wide wreath base. Like sometimes you'll see in craft stores, it's a wire wreath base, but there's like 3 layers of wire. And you don't really want to spend time threading this between those layers. That would be annoying. But if you go around the whole thing, you're just going to eat your spool of wire up really fast. All right, I bet we can get a little more pine in there. Here's my, all right, there we go. That guy's kind of chunky. That's fun. Now, as we get to where it gets kind of narrow, I have to keep pulling this back, and I'm going to start making sure that I stuff my ends, if you can see that, underneath over here where they're aiming. We can get a bit more in there. And we're almost all the way around. And push this back, tuck this under, and then wrap. Push it over, tuck it under, and wrap. Now, when we get to the point where we simply can't get this pushed over anymore, for our very last bundles, I'll still push it over, lay this in, and then I'll take a couple sprigs from that previous bundle and separate them out and wrap it in with this one. And that's going to help feather where the seam is from where we started and stopped, and make it much harder for anyone to guess where you started making a wreath.
Laura, can you repeat that? The internet kind of made a little burp there, and I think we missed a few sentences.
Sure. Okay. So as I'm getting to where I can't hardly push where I started over anymore, I'm going to start making my bundle clusters a little bit lighter, a little smaller. I'm still going to push this over and lay it in. And then I'm going to take a couple of pieces from the old bundle, flip them over, and then wrap around that. And that feathers the seam so that we can't tell where that was. And then now I'm going to do one more where I just flip it over, weasel my way through, make sure that that looks pretty even. That's looking good. I'm going to flip it over, get rid of these extra dudes. They're out of our way. And that brings me right back to where my beginning is, and I can wrap around that several times and give her a trim. And that little end, then I want to poke it back into the boughs so it's not sticking out and going to rub on the wall or the door. So there's the back side. And there is the front side of the wreath. And this is the side view for depth. Now we can decorate. Yay! So let's see, there's my top. That's where I'm going to hang it. So you can look at your wreath and decide, where do you want your bow to go? We're going to make our bow
hang on, just Laura, just one second.
If you think about where you want it to go, you can plan the rest of your attack.
I was going to say there's a little bit of delay in the secondary camera. So, yep, Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. There was just a little bit of delay. I think not just
there?
for me. Yep.
Okay. All right. So when you're planning your decorations, think about where your bow is going to go. And that might be where there's a thinner spot. Some people like the bow at the bottom. Some people like it on the side. I'm going to make my bow so it sits at the top with the curling bottom part of the bow laying over. So if my bow is going to be here with it draping like this, then I'm going to put some decorations on the sides, and I'm going to also hang an ornament in the middle. That's my plan, but you can design your plan, what works best for you. Where is the end on this? I think I have an end. If you want to put some pretty garland on your wreath, you can peel back some of the boughs, tuck it in there, kind of twist the end back on itself around one of the sprigs. And then you can draw that through and have it peek around the front as many times as you like. That guy's a little short. So we'll grab another one and wrap around that little guy right there to anchor it. And where's an end on this guy? That looks good. Pick up where we left off. Wrap it around that little twig. You can also do this with strings of cranberries. Wrap it around, back. Add a little sparkle. And I can even hook this right on to where I started. Just wrap it around. Lovely. Now let's get some ornaments and some pine cones. So you really can, anything that you can get wire around, you can add to your wreath. So this is a nice little old world style ornament. So I'm going to take some wire, and if you have the lighter weight florist wire around, that works fine for this job. I'm going to cut off a piece that's this green on green, so I'll hold on to the ends. It's about 8 inches to a foot long, and I'll thread it onto the string of my ornament. Fold that in half, give it a twist, and that anchors where it's attaching to the piece. And now I'm going to have this drape down into the middle of my wreath. So I'm going to go split the wire. So I've got one end on this side and one end on that side. I'm going to come through so that it sandwiches the wreath in the middle. And right now I'm twisting the ends together, and then I'm taking the raw ends of the wire and pushing them back into the boughs. Now, when I hold up my wreath, that will rest there in the middle. Pine cones, which you can use any side of pine cone you desire. These two have wire on them. This one does not, so I'll show you how to do that. Again, we want a piece, but this piece we're going to want a little bigger because we have to go around the middle of the pine cone. So this one is about 14 inches. And I'm going to come near the base of the pine cone, and I'm going to try to thread in around those spiky parts, and then I'll give it a twist. So now I have the two ends of the wire here and here, my pine cone in the middle. And if you want to add additional pine cones in a cluster, you can bring their ends and wrap them onto around these ones. 3 is always a nice decorative number. Visually odd numbers look nicer than even numbers. All right, so I have a nice little pine cone cluster and 2 wires. So I'm going to snuggle that guy here into this spot instead of just laying it right on the top and making a waist in your piece. It's nice to kind of snuggle it down in there a little bit. And I've worked my way through the boughs till I come out the other side. And then I'm going to twist these guys together. Make sure it's fairly snug so it's not floppy. Twisting, twisting, and taking the raw ends and pointing them back into the boughs so there aren't raw ends here on the back. There's our little pinecone friends. Now here's a fun ornament that has no string, but lots of places I could put a wire. So I'll cut another chunk. And I'm going to, this looks a little iffy, but I'll go around the back leg. How about that? And again, once I've got it threaded through, give it several twists. And now I'm going to do that opposite where my pine cones are. Nestle it into the greenery a little bit. And thread my wires through to the back side. Twisting, twisting, twisting. Bring the raw edges back into the greenery. And now I've got a sweet little rocking horse. All right, time for the bow. In preparation of doing your bow, you want to cut your wire. Otherwise, you will wish you were an Indian goddess with 6 arms later. So this one I've got about a 14-inch piece. I'll set that to the side. And I like to use wire for a bow, wired ribbon. So it has some wire on both ends, and that helps so that when you pose things, it stays there. You want some width on your ribbon, but it doesn't have to be inordinately big. The next thing we're going to do is cut both of the trailing tails, which is going to be one piece. And it's going to meet in the middle. And you can make that as long or as short as you like. And go to where that middle is and twist it twice. This is especially important if you have ribbon that has a right side and a wrong side. For instance, this side has this nice glitter and this side does not. So we want both of the right sides facing upwards. And we'll set that aside with our wire, which, where did my wire go? It fell off the table. I'm going to cut
just a little note. We're getting a little bit of delay with the secondary camera. So when you say something, just give us a little beat for the video footage to catch up with what you're saying.
Great. So I'll bring this guy back. So now we're on to the tricky part. So I'll take this slow. We're going to create the middle of the bow and work our way out towards the edges or the back side of the bow. And every time we do another piece, we're going to add another double twist. And remember, the double twist is so that always the right side of the ribbon is facing outward. So I'll tuck that under. So this part is going to be the middle of the bow. And as it comes under, I'm going to twist it. And this time I'm going to twist it once so that it's right side up. If you're ever not sure how many times to twist it, just double check that as the ribbon comes out the other side, it's right side up. I'm going to keep this part pinched with my left hand because I'm right-handed so that this holds the bow together until I'm ready to put the wire on. Then this part comes back. We're going to build the sides of the bow like a figure 8. So this comes back to center, give it a twist. Bring this side back to center. Give that a twist. try to keep these two sides approximately the same distance apart. And I just keep stacking them up back here. And again, twist. And again. And another twist. Oop, down there. And again, twist. I want to end up with 3 long ones on each side. And again, and a twist. So I have 3 on this side, 3 on this side, and 1 in the middle. And I can trim that off. So I've still got a little bit of a stump. Then behind all of this, I'm going to lay the tails right side up. So it's one continuous stack. Then I take my wire and I'm going to thread through where my thumb is, right through there. Until I've got half the wire on this side and half the wire on this side. Bring it all the way through the stack around to where my pointer finger is. Make sure it's grabbing all of the layers and that it's tight. And then go ahead and twist that several times. So that when you let go, the bow stays together. We'll put the bow on and then we'll pose it. So mine's going to be at the top. There's top. There's. So I'll thread through all of the boughs. Get it tight. Twist it several times. Hide the ends back into the greenery. And lay it down. Now, because we have wire in this, we can make sense out of the tangled mess that we have. So figure out who's your top and bottom. Top and bottom. And the middle of this, each 3. And the center. You can even have 4 on each side if you want. Then I can take these tails and do fun things like give them curls. And then I can take that curl, I can kind of tuck it under this garland here. I can even tuck it under the horse. My little ornament in the middle. And there, of course, is my wire reappeared. And then you have your own lovely holiday wreath. Yay! Which you can personalize and decorate and pose to your heart's content.
That's really beautiful, Laura. I love it. Do folks have questions that they'd like to ask? Feel free to drop them into chat or into the Q&A and we'll get them answered. We're all still waiting for the news on removing pitch, of course.
Yes. But if there's anything else you need me to demo, let's do that first. I'll show you the back side again, in case that's helpful.
Question that came in about, do you have other recommendations about making, are there any simpler ways to make a bow?
Buy
Good
it.
answer.
You can get them pre-made if the bow making part is done. I sometimes find nice pre-made bows at thrift stores in their Christmas stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. All right, let's
But if you
see.
take some time for practice.
I used to work at a florist, and I can tell you that you can make the bow and then unmake it several times, and the ribbon will survive a couple of efforts.
Excellent. I can re-demo the bow again, if that would be helpful. I can get another piece of ribbon and do that.
Let us know if you'd like to see a second demo. I've noted it in the chat several times, but we will post a recording of this webinar at northhouse.org in the next week or so, or I'm sorry, the next couple of days. And so you'll be able to go back and watch and stop and restart at the parts where you want to. Jenny says, please demo the bow one more time. The video is a little glitchy with the secondary camera, so that, Laura, do you think you could demo it not from the secondary camera, but actually just watching you do it?
I can try that. Let me stop the secondary camera if I can do that without getting totally pitchy. All right. See if we can do a bow in free space. Sorry that the secondary camera is misbehaving tonight. Maybe too many people on my internet provider are watching Netflix. So you first want to cut your piece of wire about 1 foot to 14 inches long. Set that where your wreath won't make you lose it because you'll need it later. Next, we're going to cut the length of the tails of the bow, and you want it to be long enough to be both tails. We'll cut that off. So I have both tails. And at that center, I'm going to twist it twice so that the pretty shiny front sides are both facing forward. Set that aside as well. Now, I'm not going to pre-cut the next phase. I'll just keep working off the roll. And we're going to start with the middle of the bow and work our way out to the bigger edges of the bow. So I'm first going to twist the end and bring that around, right side facing up. My left hand is going to stay busy holding all of the layers together. So this is the middle part, so it's not very big. And as it comes around the bottom, I'll give it a single twist such that here's the right side and here's the right side as well. Always the right side should end up facing outwards. Now it's going to be a figure 8 pattern. So I'll build a loop on this side, and I'll build a loop on that side, and I'll build a loop on this side, and back and forth until I have the number of loops that I desire. So I'll bring this one up like so. And you can make this as long as the bigness of bow that you desire. Twist it twice. So all the twists are going to stack up here between my thumb and my index finger. Bring it up on this side. Twist it again, like so. Now we've got like a dragonfly. And we're going to turn it into a butterfly by adding additional layers on either side. And every time I add a loop, I give it a twist on the back. Add a loop. Give it a twist. Add a loop. Give it a twist. That way, add a loop. So now I have 3 loops on each side. There's one hiding over here, and my middle. So now I can trim this, make sure that you leave enough that you can still pinch it back here. So here's the front view. There's the side view. There's the back. I'm now going to take my tails and lay that in behind, so it continues to add to the back. Take my wire, thread it in here in this middle part. Make sure that it's going to snag all the layers. Come around. There we go. To the back again, and get it nice and tight and twist it several times. So you've still got your two ends to attach to your wreath. And posing it seems to work best once it's on your wreath because you have something to tug against. But essentially you want the middle to be nice and round. And then you can pose the 3 loops on either side, which is why there's a wire in them. So that makes that a lot handier. Until you get
nice.
Just the look that you desire.
Great. And there's
Yay.
A question that the twisting is to make sure that the right side of the fabric shows up, right? It's not serving a way of keeping the bow functional. It's just an aesthetic choice.
It does help this bundle be snugger. Mm-hmm. If the wire was also having to crush the width of the bow, it would be hard to get a real tight fit. So it does 2 things.
And he says, thanks.
Awesome. If I could, I'd hand you that one to the camera and you could use it, but I'll have to save it for another wreath. Laura's mail order bow business. That might take off.
As part of florist training, that was sort of your first assignment for many hours, just making bows. All right. Any further questions folks have? Laura, do you just make wreaths for your own use or do you sell them at the farm?
I haven't made enough volume to be selling them. I have had an occasional commission for one, but mostly I decorate our farm and our creamery, and I have sent them as gifts before as well.
And you're really busy putting together all kinds of other kits and things that you have for sale on your website this time of year too, right?
Yes, like lots of Santa kits right now. We've got
if you want to make a Santa gnome.
We have 2 sold out Santa classes with North House coming up next week. But the kits are available on my farm's website, northstarhomestead.com. Click shop, and that'll get you in. If you still want Santa gnome in your life, and we've got lots of wonderful felting and crochet and painting with wool classes coming up in 2021 with North House as well, which I would show you some of them, but I'm a little sticky. Are we ready for the De-Sticky Fest? You ready?
Go for it. I did put a link to your website in the chat there for folks. Laura's website is just a treasure trove of handy videos and cool kits you can order. I just sent my niece one of the like felt your own owl kits. So there's a bunch of cool stuff there. All right, tell us how to de-pitch.
So I learned this from the friend who worked at the wreath barns, and she, by the end of the day, literally her hands were black. And you could wear gloves while you do it. I find that there's something about the tactile element in wreath making that once you add gloves on it, it's hard to get things tight. And then invariably you end up wrapping the tip of the finger of the glove into the wreath, and it's a mess.
Sure.
So the reason that pitch does not come off well with soap is that pitch is not the kind of oil base that saponified soap can grab. But if you can mix it with the type of oil base that soap will grab, it will take it off. So grab some olive oil, and your hands are going to be wonderfully soft after this. It doesn't take a lot, just sort of smear your fingers down in it. And the trick is to really, really massage it in. everywhere that the pitch got. Your fingernails, on the back sides, on the front sides, and just really, really, really work that in. And you'll see it start to soften those spots that have gotten rather stuck. And now when I wash my hands, it all comes off. And my hands are moisturized in the process. And that's the magic trick.
That is a really
Yay.
useful trick. Well, Laura,
And
thank
again,
you. Thank you so much for sharing your skill with us as you have been through this whole rigmarole. And I highly encourage folks to check out Laura's needle felting classes, whether through North House or Ely Folk School or other places where she's teaching. A big part of the reason for pushing things online is we want to keep our teaching artists busy and well employed through all of this too, so that when the time is right to join up with them in the classroom, everybody's still around to do that. A couple of notes from North House. Top secret news, we're going to be releasing 10 more online classes in January, February, and I think even March on Friday. They are up on our website. You can check them out, and they'll open for registration on Friday. And we're going to continue to add online coursework through the winter and spring as we all patiently wait for the right time to reappear in person with one another. Anything else you want to add, Laura?
Just thank you everyone for joining us. Have a safe and happy holiday. And remember to check out the video that teaches you how to sustainably harvest the boughs and identify the tree so that you can enjoy making your own balsam wreath.
I will post another link to that because it's way back in the chat. The other thing I would say is that we're going to have 2 more Thursday night Crafting in Place webinars in December. Next week is called some Going Gently into That Good Night, and it is about astral happenings in the winter with our stargazing instructor, Bob King, specifically the great convergence of Saturn and Jupiter, which is going to happen this month. Very exciting. And then the 3rd week of December, the 17th, on Thursday night, we're going to have a storytelling session of Northern stories with Terry O'Brien. So it'll be really fun to, if you're able on Thursday nights to join us, 7 o'clock, it's always free. And we love to have folks participate. So thanks again to Laura. Thanks to everybody who's, oh, and the other thing I was going to say is if you do make a wreath, post a picture on Facebook or Instagram and tag North House so we can see your handiwork. We would love that. And yeah, in 1 second, and I will drop a link to the harvest video in the chat. And otherwise, thanks so much, everybody. We really appreciate it. Have a great night.
Thank you.